Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cutting Edge Figure Skating Podcast. My name is Kim Dunaway, and in this episode, I am covering the ice dance event at the 2024 European Championships. This event was held in Kaunas, Lithuania, and it was the premier event. It closed out the event. The attendance was great throughout the entire championships, but they were definitely at another level for the ice dance, cheering on Reed and Embry Levicius, who were their medal favorites going into the event, and it was a great moment when they were able to accomplish that. So, this event as a whole, I thought was a little bit lower scoring than maybe I would have expected, just based on what we've seen Gwenard and Fabry get this season, or even Fear and Gibson at times, which I'm totally here for. I don't love like the over scoring at times. I mean, can we save something for like those really amazing performances? Or if you must throw out season's best, can we do them at Worlds? So, in general, I thought it was a bit lower scoring, except for some of the teams that did manage personal best. But let's get into the results. So, first place here, as expected, were the Italians, Charlene Guinard and Marco Fabri of Italy. And coming off of that huge upset that they had at NHK Trophy, they have rebounded very nicely coming out of that, the silver at Grand Prix final coming into this event, and then winning here. Not a huge score for them in the rhythm dance, but I do love that they really embrace the camp more so than just about any other team has this season. I feel like a lot of teams have just sort of shied away from it when they picked more of the campier music. And even like Against All Odds as a choice is super cheesy. And even like the arm movements that Charlene is doing throughout the program, just sort of emphasizing all of this like extra, just camp and cheese. And I love their commitment in this routine, even if I don't love the costumes. But great performance for them in the rhythm dance. And then the free dance, of course, I've been gushing over this routine all season. I love this program. It has so many stunning moments. My only nitpick was in his 1 foot turn sequence. I thought was a little messy towards the end, even though he still got a level 3. Their lifts are just out of this world. And what really stands out is just how effortless they make the lifts. Like some teams have nice lifts, but they look like it took effort to get in them. It looks like it takes effort to maintain it. Whereas them, everything just looks so easy. And so I think sometimes people feel like maybe this team isn't as good as they are because they do make everything look so easy. That being said, I don't know that they would have won the free dance if Fear and Gibson had come out and skated to the quality that they are capable of doing, because they won by just a couple of points over them in free dance. And Fear and Gibson made a mistake. So let's talk about Lila and Lewis. In the rhythm dance, definitely a big improvement over what we saw from them at Grand Prix final. They came out of the gates and made huge mistakes in their twizzles and just took them out of any contention for the podium. So here, the twizzles were pretty strong. I thought as a whole, I thought Lewis was just totally on fire in this whole program. I feel like this season, more so than most, I felt like they have been pretty well matched, especially in this program. But this performance, I felt like my eye was definitely going more to Lewis. He just was on another gear, I felt like, here than he has been all season. He was originally given a level 4 for his midline step. It was downgraded to a level 2 after the tech panel got their hands on it. And I also noticed that he didn't grab Lila's ponytail during the rhythm sequence like they normally do. And I wouldn't have thought that that was something that I would have missed, but I kind of did. I just kind of liked that moment. I even like rewound it a couple times to make sure that I didn't miss it. And it definitely wasn't there. So I don't know if it was just a slight, it just didn't happen in this time where they've like permanently taken that out. So, but I did notice that. In the free dance, however, everything was really pretty strong. The dance spin was strong, but they stumbled coming out of it. So they were trying to get a difficult feature on that exit, which they didn't get because of the stumble. And so their margin of defeat in the free dance was 2 points. And the difference between Gwenard and Fabry's dance spin and Lila and Lewis's dance spin, 2 points. So that was a huge, huge miss for them. It also only got a level 2 at Grand Prix final, which was basically the difference between them and Gillis and Poirier right ahead of them, and so don't know what has been amiss these last couple of competitions with that spin. They definitely want to get that fixed because the judges are still giving them lots of GOE. They're still getting good levels everywhere else, and you would hate for them to miss out on a podium spot because they screwed up a dance spin. They may not get a podium spot anyway because the other teams ahead of them are really fantastic teams, but you want them to at least do what they do well when they do everything else so well. And I know, again, people either this program has grown on them or they still don't like it, or they decided that they didn't like it early in the season and they refuse to change their mind. I, I ask you, name me one other character step that anybody else is doing that you remember a single piece of choreography. And I don't know that you can. Like, I get that the push-ups and all of that are, like, super over the top, but it's like you remember that character step. If you take that character step out of this program and you put it on its own, like, you know exactly what program that is. If you take a lot of these other character steps out of people's program, it's just another set of choreography. And so, while again, I don't know that this will end up on my top 10 list at the end of the season. I'm not that excited about the routine, but I do think that it's a brilliant idea at the end of the day because it has made people talk. It is so unique to them, and I think that they're bringing some things to the table in terms of character step and just overall theming that we're not seeing with a lot of teams, especially in this like sea of just like piano piece after piano piece. All right, so moving on from them to our bronze medalist, that was Reed and Ambrulavicius of Lithuania, and they continue to have a really strong season after two bronze medal finishes in the Grand Prix. They were by far and away the third place team here, not really close to Lopareva and Brazil, and we definitely didn't get any kind of a battle between them and Percula and Versalis, who were much further down in the standings. So in the rhythm dance, it looked like she had a new costume, but I think she just ditched the jacket that she was wearing in all season. I actually think it looked better this way. They were actually first in base value in the rhythm dance. They had the best levels of the competition, them and Lopareva and Brazil did. I thought that Allison had a pretty obvious slip in her midline step, but they still got a level 3, interestingly enough. And the free dance, I thought they really fed off the energy of the crowd. The music at times they're so the 3 pieces of music that they use are so random. It doesn't really seem like that they go together, but somehow it works for them. They were not as strong technically as they were in the rhythm dance, but they did get a lot of GOE, I think the best GOE of their career. They said that the crowd was so loud at the end of their routine that they couldn't even hear the music at all. And I do wonder after this, like, what's next for them because and some of the press coming into this event, Allison said that one of the reasons that she hasn't gotten citizenship in Lithuania is because she won't give up her citizenship in the US, which I totally understand. But if she isn't going to get citizenship, and I guess it's not completely out of the question, even with her refusing to give up her American citizenship, and they're not going to be able to make it to the Olympics in Italy in 2026, are they going to have a bigger season than what they've had this season with 2 bronze medals in the Grand Prix, a bronze medal at Europeans? Now, they're getting the best scores they've gotten in their career. Maybe they could hope to push Farron Gibson and Guinard and Fabry next year. I think when you look at the talent that is behind them, I think it's far more likely that they'll get passed by some of these other younger teams. And so I'm not advocating that they retire, but I just wonder if it's off the table for them to go to the Olympics, if that's enough motivation for them to continue on when they are having a season with a great deal of success and having a home Europeans. It's just, I wonder where they go from here. In fourth place here was Lopareva and Brazil of France. And like Reed and Ambrulavicius, they had the best levels in the rhythm dance. And I know the rhythm dance is super quirky, but it definitely stands out, whether it's in a good way or a bad way, with all of the very typical 80s music that we get. They're just technically very strong, and they were again in the free dance. It was interesting because the commentator on the world feed, which I prefer to watch just because I don't, you get to watch the replays instead of having to deal with commercials. And, Johnny talks way too much, in my opinion, and Ben doesn't talk enough on the NBC feed. But even so, Chris was an interesting commentator, but and he was so like flowery with all of the competitors. Like, great program. Like, take your hats off to them, and oh, they really laid the gauntlet down. And then what he said after La Preva in Brazil was, they left me a little cold, and I was like, okay, that's like way low praise coming from him, where he's been just super positive about everybody. And I can understand why some people don't connect with his team. I think I did watch, when I watched the rewatch, I did watch the NBC coverage, and Ben also said that he felt like they needed to connect more, warm up more, I think is what he used, which I was like, well, he's using some of the same language, maybe a little bit nicer than what Chris said on the world feed, but they are basically sort of saying the same thing. And so I think that for me, like, I like the Bells of Moscow section of their free dance more than I like more of the subtle piano that they're using there. Their character step to me is a little frantic, but I love the end with that ending pose that they do. I think they're very versatile. We saw them do Edith Piaf last year, and they've got this whole puppeteer thing going on in the rhythm dance, and I would love to see them continue to push themselves, because boy, do they have a French team behind them that is definitely going to be pushing them next season, if not at Worlds this season. But a great showing for them right off the podium. I think they've got to be super pleased with that. And of course, there are lots of rumors of Papadakis and Cizeron coming back, which would, might complicate things for some of the French teams if that is the case. And we'll see. Obviously, that's just rumors at this point. They were at the exhibition gala this weekend doing an exhibition. All right. 5th place team here. Demogé and Le Mercier, also from France, and they are really a team on the move, because I remember at what Grand Prix it was that they were at with Brody and Somerville, and Brody and Somerville had done this amazing free dance, and I thought, there's no way Loisia and Theo are going to beat that, just based up on what they've done in the past. And they went out and crushed it. It had a personal best, and I was like, okay, just ate my words on that one. And then here, 2 really phenomenal performances. They had a personal best in both segments of the competition. They were right there, like, stacked up with a lot of teams. So even though they were 8th in after the rhythm dance, there was like 1 point that separated like 4th to 10th place. It was not 10th place, 4th to 9th place. It was super duper close. So we actually did have a little bit of movement in that next section because of those scores that were so close together in the rhythm dance. And so then they just had a really phenomenal free dance as well. So the rhythm dance, I love so many elements of this program. Great speed in their twizzles, their rotational lift. I think they have the best rotational lifts in this competition. Like, I think they've gone above Turkula and Verse Lewis at this point. I love their rhythm sequence that they do. I wish the beginning section was longer. They start off with the cool hip hop music to start, and then it sort of gets to the slow section. I wish that went on a little bit longer. I still wish that she had a cool 80s hip hop costume. Like, give her like a faded, like, denim jacket, and it would really, really sort of make a lot more sense and just elevate the routine, just that extra step than what it is right now with the costumes that don't match the routine. But they are such a versatile team, because I thought they did that hip hop really pretty well. And then they come in the free dance and they do this just really pretty Claire de Lune program. And I think it's improved every time I have seen it this season. Again, twizzles look good. Their lifts are very good and they look effortless. And I feel like they do just a really good job of just maintaining that energy and the speed just throughout the entire performance. And I'm looking at the way that their scores have gone up this season. They're a young team. They probably have more of an upside than Evgenia and Jeffrey do. So I think if I'm them, I'm definitely starting to look over my shoulder. And this is a team I think to really watch based upon the improvements that they have made throughout the season. And I think that they have a lot more to give in the future. Sixth place here was definitely probably the biggest disappointment in the ice dance competition, and that was Turkula Inverse-Lewis from Finland. They were last year's bronze medalists. Now, interestingly enough, last year Europeans was in Finland, and they really capitalized off of that energy the way that Reed and Ambulevicius capitalized off of that energy at a home Europeans as well. Don't know where Europeans is next year. Maybe I'll look that up here in a second and see who might be on track to get the bronze next year. But they've unfortunately just had a bit of a rough season with their levels just all the way around. So in their rhythm dance, they had a new costume, and she's gotten rid of the tutu, which I'm sure is more comfortable. I feel like the tutu was more 80s than what this one is. And it's funny because have felt like all season that as much out of the water as this program is for them, that they've really risen to the occasion and done it really well. However, in this competition, I don't know if it's because this is the most stacked competition that we have seen them in this season or what. They just look like they were out of their element, and they were super disappointed with their scores in the kiss and cry that you could definitely see. And it made me kind of wonder, like, do ice dancers feel in their body a difference between a level 1 midline step and a level 3 midline step? Because they made comments after their last Grand Prix as well that not getting the levels, and it's a consistent problem for them. So here in the rhythm dance, they were 13th in base value. So low levels in the midline step and in their pattern step. In the free dance, they had a season's best in base value, and they were still 12th with all these other teams. It lost a lot of points in the one foot turn sequence. In the step sequence, everything else was a level 4, but it's been an issue all season. I mean, their best performances were at Finlandia and at Grand Prix Espa, and they had the same level 2 on their one foot turn sequence and the same level 2s on their step sequence. They're getting a lot of help from the judges in GOE. They were 4th here in terms of GOE. But they've got to work on the technicality of these elements because it's really, really holding them back. And there's so many teams behind them, and they were even passed by a couple that they beat last year. It's going to be a real problem for them going forward if these are things that they cannot correct. And yeah, we'll see what happens. I love this free dance. It's beautiful. I think their position changes and their lifts are just so strong, but the judges can only do so much. 7th place here was the Taschelers from the Czech Republic, and they were coming back from an injury. So after Skate America, Philip had been experiencing some pain, and it turns out he had a fractured vertebrae, and so they had to take quite a bit of time off. So this is the first competition that they have been back. And in the rhythm dance, came out really, really strong, got a lot of GOE on their elements, but only a level 2 on their pattern and a level 3 on his twizzle. So even though they had great scores for them out of the rhythm dance, definitely places that they could have done even better and really been able to push the teams ahead of them a little bit more. And unfortunately, in the free dance, they lost a spot. So they were 5th after the rhythm dance. They were in that last group, but they lost a couple spots. A couple teams passed them, 7th in the free dance, and ended up 7th overall. I do really love that 2 of their lifts, that first straight line lift that they do where she's in a handstand, she just gets into it so quickly. I feel like brother-sister teams, maybe they're willing to go all in a little bit more than some of the other teams are because they've just got that built-in trust just already being siblings. And then I also love the curve lift that they do later in the program. It's kind of similar to what Madison Chalk did last season in their free dance where she lifted her leg over Evan's head. And Natalia does a similar move. It's not the exact same thing, but it's sort of a similar aesthetic. I'm sure it's inspired by that same lift that Madison and Evan did last season. I think the issue for me with them in this free dance is the same issue I've had all season. It's just it's a good piece. It's a nice program, but there's just a lot of piano pieces. And they're a team that I feel like has a lot of power, have a lot of cool strengths that aren't really being utilized in this program, and it doesn't stand out in a sea of a lot of other piano programs. And I hope, and they did the same thing last year. I mean, they did Leonardo and Nadi last year. Yes, it was a climate change program, but it was a piano program too. I really hope next year they do something a little bit more out of the box. It doesn't have to be out of the box, just different. And but I mean, still, I mean, coming back from injury, I think they had a good showing here. I'm sure they were disappointed to fall to seventh, but all of those teams were stacked so close together. All right. In eighth place here was Diana Davis and Gleb Smolkin of Georgia. So this is always a very, very polarizing team. And so let me just say off the top, they were eighth here. Last time we saw them Europeans, they were actually seventh. So they were behind Sinitsina and Katsalapov, Stepanova and Buchan, Guinard and Fabry, Smart and Diaz, Fear and Gibson, and Hurtado and Calavan. So several of those teams have moved on. And they were actually ahead of Reed and Ambrulevicius, the Tashlers, Desmogés and Lemercier, and Loparova and Brazeau, who all beat them here. So all the talk about they're getting overscored or they didn't come in and slot themselves in right where they left off. So let's be fair about that. In the rhythm dance, they were fifth overall in base value, so they got good levels on everything. It's not my favorite Michael Jackson rhythm dance, but it's fine. The free dance, on the other hand, I just feel like a few things. One, Swan Lake, you're telling a story, right? So most of the teams or single skaters, when they use the Black Swan music, you're supposed to be someone who's impersonating the White Swan. Okay, so you're telling a story. And then when you have a pair team or a dance team, you're sort of able to give the story a little bit more. Like the Black Swan is sort of almost seducing the guy in the ballet story. Okay, there's no story in this program. They're not telling a story. I don't really understand the packaging, even so, like with her hair in a braid, and it just and we've also got another Swan Lake piece here, which I also think isn't fantastic either, that the Mrazeks are doing, but I think it's more successful as a vehicle than this is. And so I just don't think ballet suits them very well. They clearly like to do drama. You know, last time we saw them, they were doing Tango de Roxanne, which I didn't think they did that necessarily great either. But I think there's lots of different pieces of music that they could do that won't really emphasize some of their weaknesses, which I feel like this does. There's no effort for her to point her toes. She's not very graceful. There are things that they do well. I think they do have good lifts. The problem is, the lifts look like they take a lot of effort to get into, to stay in. And so I think that that's something that even though they have some great positions in their lifts, they really need to work on kind of the lift as a whole to make it look more effortless. I don't think they do twizzles particularly well. They got their levels here, but I don't think it's a strength of this team. And they're always going to have a hard time connecting with the audience because, for the most part, I don't know that the audience even wants to like this team, fair or as unfair as that may be. But they could definitely set themselves up for success better by just picking better material. So, but eighth here, what does that translate to at Worlds? Honestly, probably not in the top 10 once you add, at least 5 teams between US and Canada who are going to be vying for top 10 spots, which means if they don't get in the top 10, then they don't have 2 spots coming into next season. And then Kozakova and Revia are probably on the outside looking in, which sucks. Now they're injured right now. But, are Diane and Gleb going to get all the Grand Prix assignments next season? So as much as you like, it's hard to root for this team. You almost want them to do well enough so Kozakova and Revia can get assignments. But I don't know. We'll see. Next season, they've definitely got to pick some better material than what they had for them this year. But I think after a year off and inserting themselves back into the conversation, I think they should be pleased with their performances here. In ninth place were the Moravcseks, also of the Czech Republic, our second sibling team. Really strong in that rhythm dance. I mean, they were right there with the 75, with all bunched up with all the other teams. They were in ninth, but they were frankly only like a point and a half out of sixth place. And so I think that there was opportunity for them to move up a little bit in the free dance. Unfortunately for them, there were some issues in the free dance in his 1 foot step. So lost a couple of levels and had negative GOE, and that really kept them. So they ended up 11th in the free skate. Unfortunately, they still ended up 9th overall, but I don't know that they would have made enough to have jumped Davis and Smolkin, who were ahead of them. So I don't know that it made a difference at the end of the day in their overall placements. But for me, it's concerning just because they almost have a pattern, especially in juniors, of always making an error kind of somewhere. And that's something that they're really going to have to clean up, because I think that they've got all the goods to really start making a push next season based upon what we have seen their scoring trajectory this season. But they definitely want to stop shooting themselves in the foot. And I also look forward to some new material from them. Biggest issue I had with them in this competition, and maybe they've been doing this all season, it was just more prominent to me, Katarina just opening her mouth like the whole time in both programs was driving me nuts. It makes a bit more sense in the 80s rhythm dance if you're going to do it. I don't like it, but if you're going to do it, like, why are you doing it in Swan Lake? Like, I don't get it. Like, just stop opening your mouth. And I also wonder, like, how long can the Tasslers really hold this team off? Because they're very, very close points-wise, especially kind of in the rhythm dance. And, I mean, both teams are really fast. And I think we still haven't seen the best out of the Tasslers either. But I think the upside of Katarina and her brother, Daniel, are so high. So, again, big expectations for this team. They've just got to clean up some of these areas that they make those little to major mistakes that have held them down from their best this season. All right, in 10th place here was one of my favorites, Orihara and Pirinen of Finland also. Their rhythm dance, which I love, and really the biggest issue was just in his twizzles, but they were 18th in base value. That really knocked them down. Judges were really pretty split on them. They had ordinals all the way from 8th to 15th. And while they were 10th, there was quite a gap between them and the Moravcseks, who were in 9th. And so there was like a 7-point gap there. And that was not something that they were going to make up in the free skate, even as brilliant as their free dance was. I very much look forward to seeing this team at Worlds. It's just, once you get into this part of the competition, it's so hard to really be able to move up, even as brilliant as I think that they are. And they've definitely got to make sure that those step sequences, twizzles, like everything that they can do technically is on point, because it's even made more difficult to move up when you're making those little mistakes here and there. But both of their routines are just so fantastic. And I think everybody is a big fan of their Chicago program. I saw some people on social media saying they feel like it's the best Chicago program that we've seen. I mean, it's easy to have a lot of recency bias, but I mean, I think that that's fair. I mean, the first Chicago program that comes to my head is like Jenny Kirk's, and, you know, it was okay. So yeah, maybe. All right. So that's the top 10. Just some honorable mentions that I wanted to talk about. In 13th place was Caroline Swissis and Shane Ferris of Ireland. So, of course, they are formerly a Canadian dance team, and they are still training in Toronto with Caroline's coaching team. But they obviously were not getting the opportunities that they wanted out of Team Canada. Probably see the writing on the wall with Piper and Paul, Laurence and Nick not retiring, Marie Jade and Romain coming over from France. And so they were just sort of getting pushed down further and further. And so they took the opportunity to switch citizenships. So they had to sit out a year. So I think up until Golden Spin, we hadn't seen them at all. Of course, we didn't have video there. And so this is really the first that we have seen them this season. I thought their rhythm dance was super fun. Rick James, I can't think of another team we've seen skating to Super Freak this season. So that was really entertaining. I thought their free dance, her dress was gorgeous. I thought it was well skated. I just thought it was a little dull. But I have no idea what the citizenship prospects for them are. It'd be such a short turnaround for them to be able to represent Ireland 2 years from now. So I don't even know that that's a possibility, but here at least they'll be able to get here. They were Europeans and they'll be able to go to Grand Prix and things like that they weren't able to do. And apparently this is the first ice dance team that we've ever seen from Ireland, which is amazing. So good for them. They seem to have a really good time, really loved being at Europeans. Obviously they've only been at 4 continents before now. The other team I wanted to sort of mention as well was the Ukrainian team of Pinchuk and Pogorilov, maybe. We're on the junior circuit this season. I love this free dance that they do to Vogue and Frozen from Madonna. I think that it is just so fantastic. I like it better than I liked Farrah Gibson's Vogue, which I didn't really love that much at the time. It was just so different. But this, I think, is just really well skated. And the interesting thing with them is they were 15th last year and only 18th this year, but they had better scores this year than what they had last year, because last year, the 20th team scored 51-41 in the rhythm dance. This season, the 20th team that made the free dance scored a 61.38. So it was a 10-point difference between last year's danced at the Europeans to this season, which is crazy. So you could have skated much better than what you did last season and still not be able to make the free skate. So I know a lot of people would love to see a bigger field, not just here, but I've heard that also at Worlds. But they're going to cut that off at 4 flights of skaters, which means 20 teams. But really amazing the level that has gone up just in a year. All right. And then too, like I mentioned before, I thought it was really, really tight, between, maybe I'll leave Lopareva and Brazeau on an island of their own in 4th place, but really between 5th and 9th was extremely close, and then you think about, okay, we're going to add Chalk and Bates, Gillis and Poirier, Lajoie and Lagat, Carrera and Ponomarenko, probably Caroline and Michael to this mix. It's going to be really, really tough for some of these teams to get into the top 10 to get those 2 spots for their country. And so, but I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be super fun in the middle section at Worlds in ice dance. And there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be really great that aren't going to make the free dance. And that's just how it is right now. All right. So Pamchenko for the ice dance event, I'm giving to Loïcia Demauget and Theo Lemercier of France. Their lifts and their free dance are just so effortless, so stunning. I love Guinard and Fabry's lifts as well. I have already given them at least 1, if not 2, Pamchenkos this season. So I'm going to give this one to our young French dance team here, who were really, really fantastic in this outing. All right. So that completes the coverage for the dance event. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. I'll be back with more recaps. You can find me in the meantime on Ice Skate Podcast, starting to upload some of my episodes up onto YouTube as well. So if you're a YouTube listener, you can check out the Cutting Edge Pod. I think you can find me at Ice Skate Podcast on that as well. Subscribe to that and you'll be able to get some podcast in that feed as well. All right, everybody, have a good rest of your week.